You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency?
All
Well,
right.
I got your message, and I'm always fascinated, when I get a call. I understand you found me on YouTube, and I never know to what level I'm going to get an interview as far as what's going to be told to me. So I do try to keep everything as private as I can and try to give advice if someone wants advice. Um, but there's a lot of things we've learned over the last 4 years in doing these interviews. We've had our own experiences and more than one way. So
Wow.
um, it's just more than just seeing these things or creatures or beings, but it was kind of a shock and surprise to us when we found out there was people that didn't want us to tell other people about them. And
Mine is a little instant. It's not something I'm going to be worried or concerned about. I mean, this goes back to 1978. So I care less who I tell it to. You know what I mean?
okay, yeah, that sounds fine. That
But
sounds
I do
fine.
care in telling it. I do care in giving it to you in a first interview. I've never had interviews about this before, other than just kind of sharing it with friends every now and then.
Well,
But
and yeah, we just kind of you just tell me like we're on the front porch having a drink, and you just start from the very beginning, and and you just speak frankly. If there's something, a road or a highway that you mention specifically, I'll be sure to cut that out. Um,
okay,
Especially if it's near personal property or a family or a friend. If you just, accidentally use a name and say, hey, Roger said this, I will cut Roger's name out.
okay, you just bleep out location factors. That's all.
Okay, that sounds good enough. You just start
Um,
anywhere you want.
Yeah, I'm in high school in a small town in Kansas, central Kansas. And as a junior in high school, I believe it was, I can't, I can only guess the month. I was dating a young girl. She was a freshman. I was a junior. We were the reason I can remember the year is because I had a 71 Plymouth Satellite. In my senior year, I had a Monte Carlo, so I knew it was in my satellite. So I pinpointed it 1978. It was like probably August or September because I think there was a lot of brush. It wasn't like the winter or the fall. So and with her,
Hmm.
it had to have been almost beginning of school year or something. So I'm thinking August or September 1978, 79 year, but 78. And it was probably towards late afternoon, and I'm in my car with her. We're driving out in the country, just probably about 2 miles west of town. It's a small town, population about 1,500, so everybody knew everybody. And we were going to go necking. Back in the days, we just go out, take your day out, just make out in your car,
Right.
and that was the good old days. And these old farmhouses, we'd go out and do that. So a friend of mine, one of my classmates, his grandfather's old abandoned house, and he had a barn in the back, like a mile west of town, and then north probably quarter mile. It's on the left side, and a driveway that led around back of the house. And it's an old white farmhouse, overgrowth, brush, like it'd been vacant for 30, 40 years.
Right.
And so I actually backed into that driveway. We got all the way back and got out of the car, my side. So the driver's side is The driver's side door opens up, and there's the house. Not too far away, pretty close. It's all kind of tight back in there. In an overgrown, overbrush property. It's a small little, what's left of a driveway. And not long after, probably just like a few minutes off towards that house, on the left side. So I'm opening my door, I'm seeing a house, and then on the left, which would have been like probably the back of the house or something, started hearing what sounded like small trees cracking. It's like, wow, okay. There's no cows out there. It's too much brush, too much overgrowth for a cow to be roaming around or anything like that. That's what startled me. And, if it was a cow, okay, there's cows out here, no big deal, but it startled me. And so I grabbed her. She's short. She was a small girl. She probably weighed 80, 90 pounds. I literally just grabbed her and threw her in the front car. And I sped out. And I floored it and got out of there. But let me back up, kind of explain those cracking noises. It was like something was there waiting for me. And when I got out, it was going to come towards me. Type of, it didn't come from down the road, or it didn't come from a distance on up to me. It was like waiting there, and then all of a sudden it started to crack the trees as it was walking. Small overgrown trees, 1, 2 inch probably, the, brush trees get. It wasn't like limbs from stepping on, your foot when you walk, you don't step on limbs. Now, what knows? It was breaking of something, snapping as it was moving. Intentional snaps of trees. Small little things, one, maybe an inch. That's what it sounded like. If I snapped a 1 inch tree, if I had all the might to do it, it would sound like that. So while I was listening to your YouTube over the last few weeks, I'm going, you had a couple of shows in there, interviews in there with, they were cracking trees as they were walking.
Yes.
Or moving or whatever. Like they're trying to scare you or something. Or
yeah, that's what we think. My brother, the first encounter that I can recall that we did ever, the interview, was my brother Lane, which was our first show. And I've asked him so many times what he saw and what happened prior to their encounter that I can kind of recall it off the top of my head. But basically that happened. My brother first witnessed something crossing a field, and it was toward the evening. The sun was setting, but you could still make out everything.
Yeah.
And it was about 200 to 225 on yardage, and it was moving so fast, yet so smooth, it didn't look real. My brother thought initially it was like an Appaloosa horse because it had this long flowing hair to it. But yet how it was running was just strange. It wasn't like a gallop, and it was so big, he thought, again, a horse. But it just didn't look right. And he indicated to his buddy that was with him, he said, what's that out there? And they both were just kind of in shock, like, I don't know. Well, it was a quiet evening. It was one of those evenings that, it was rare for Oklahoma, but it was one of those quiet Oklahoma evenings where you could just hear a pin drop. And they were near water. Their tailgate was facing a creek, and this creek was a tributary of the Arkansas River. And so it was so quiet as the sun was setting, You could hear every little thing that this creature was doing. Now, at the time, they didn't know this was a creature. They knew it was something. They just didn't know what. And
Right.
they couldn't see it because it had disappeared into this brush line. And a lot of the farmers, they don't take down the trees or the brush near creek beds or fence lines, and they just leave them for windbreaks, and a lot of property lines are along creek waterways. So
We called them up in Kansas back then. It was shelter belts.
there you go. That's the proper term. That's what they call them in Oklahoma. That's exactly what they call them here. And so it was just deadly quiet. My brother said he told his buddy wanted to get out. He says let's go. And my brother said no, let's just be quiet. Roll down the window and listen. So they rolled down the windows and they listened. And you could hear this thing moving through the brush as it was getting closer toward them. It was coming not exactly toward them, but it was moving closer down the waterway. And
Right.
it was breaking brush in the interim. And my brother said it sounded like it was breaking branches the size of ball bats. It was just snapping. Pow! It was breaking branches intentionally. It wanted to be heard. It wasn't trying to be quiet.
Yeah.
It was intentional as it was moving, and it was upset. And the branches were huge, my brother said, and which was scary to hear, and it was unnerving to his buddy. His buddy wanted to get out of there. He owned the truck, and my brother talked him into staying. And this went on for maybe, at least 15, 20 seconds. And then it got quiet. There was no sound. And then this being stepped out in the open, which was actually directly behind them about 65 yards. It stepped out into the open, and then it when it stepped out, it didn't step in their direction at first. It walked to where it stopped directly behind them, and then it gave this very mechanicalistic kind of rotation until it got to the point of staring at them directly or facing them directly. It had a very mechanical way about it. It was not just fluid. And then it just started to sway back and forth. And there was no noise, no sound, no growling. My brother couldn't smell anything. He was yelling at it. He said, "Hey, dude, we've got a gun here, and I think you need to just stop it." And it just never said anything. It just was still continuing to sway. And some expletives were said. And then maybe about another 15 to 20 seconds, it started to advance. And when it was coming, it was coming. And my brother yelled at his buddy. He said, "Let's go now. Let's go now." And the guy finally got the truck started. They didn't worry about getting stuff packed up. The tailgate was down. And so it was one of those trucks, Ford trucks, that was really light. And so when he turned that first corner, they lost everything out of the back end, the rods, the chairs. And by this time, the moon was out. There was a gleam. It's almost like a sheen you could see off the hair. It was like oily, my brother said. It was a gray silver, and it was huge, though. It was huge. And he said when they rounded that first corner, his buddy tapped the brakes to try and get a little under control before he had to go to the straightaway. And when he tapped the brakes, my brother was still hanging out the passenger side door. And that's when he saw the reflection off its brow. It had a heavy, heavy brow. It was reaching out for the bed of the truck. and he could see the hand, he could see the digits, the eyes. He could not make out any pupils, but he could see the glistening of the tail light off the eyes, and he could definitely see the brow ridge was very, very pronounced. And it chased the truck for a while with my brother hanging out, holding a 357. And the gentleman he was with was in shock. They went probably about another 3/4 of a mile, and my brother was yelling at him to slow down or they're gonna wreck. And finally they stopped before they got to the highway. And my brother said, "Let's turn around. We've got the gun." And the guy said, "You're no, you come back in your truck. We're not going back.
Yeah.
We're not going
Wow.
back." But that's the first account of many as far as branches breaking intentionally. And after doing this now for a while, what we can say with fairly good, I would say, consistency is that this creature, in my mind, had been there before. It did not want my brother and his buddy there. And the same goes true for the incident that you experienced. We believe that a lot of these farm locations and silos and barns and abandoned farmhouses are great places for these creatures to get out of the wind, get out of the weather. They're grown up, they're thick. No one's really going to mess with them there. It stays cool when it's so thick, and it's hot in the summer, and it's a great place to get out of the wind during the winter. I'm not saying they actually go into the house, but they may use a barn or a silo. And sometimes if the house actually has doors off of it, who knows? They may actually go into the house. We don't know.
It really kind of scared me because two things. I've never heard that cracking noise before of small limbs. And number two, it would crack as it walked. Like each step was a crack of the trees. Another step, so there was a break between the cracks of the crackling. Crunch, crunch, crunch. You know what I mean? Not continuous.
Wow.
And it would sound like get closer. And I didn't want to look. I didn't see anything, but I didn't want to.
Yeah, I can see
that's
why.
That's why I grabbed her. Yeah, that's why I grabbed her and literally threw her hard and out because it was coming closer, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
And there's a shelter built there, old farmhouse, barn, overgrowth. There's Solomon River, which the Smoky Hill River, Solomon River, is close to that. I know that being inquisitive about these things, I know that they like, trees, rivers, water, whatever.
Exactly. Close to waterways.
And,
Did your friend, I take it you shared with your friend what had happened, and if so, what did he say?
After that, I can't remember what me and her talked about. Just it's memory. I don't even know what we talked about after that. It just that memory sticks out in my mind. I tell that story to people from time to time. So yeah, I experienced what I was in high school, blah blah blah, and that's it. But I can go back to it. It's just that cracking of the limbs and what I did with her, and then I sped out. Actually, I think years later, senior high school, I think we had a big party there, big bonfire. We didn't think of it then. That wasn't my first trip there. A bunch of us went out maybe a year later or something. I had a cake party and all this stuff. And thinking out of it. At that moment, me and her, I'm in this It's like some big thing was walking, and as it walked, it cracked these small trees. Crunch, crunch.
Hmm.
And my thing is, am I the only one in Kansas that has an experience like that in Kansas? Do they migrate? Are there more instances like that in Kansas?
Yeah, I've done a couple. Kansas is not typically a state that you hear a lot of reports about, but there are, in my opinion, a lot of Bigfoot there. And I think the reason why, and I've got my theory why you don't hear a lot of people reporting in general, let alone say from Kansas, but I think it can follow the same type of uh, possibility here, and that is um, number one, a lot of people don't know who they can talk to. They don't really know a lot about these shows.
Right.
I mean, a lot of people do, but still, that's just a very small percentage of the people that do. And people are they want to hold tight to a lot of these encounter stories because they're already concerned about ridicule. What are they going to think? What are they going to say? I don't want to be labeled as this or that, and I don't blame people, but that's another thing. Uh, Kansas in general, I think, just is like very much like Oklahoma, and that's why even though there's um, a lot of reports that come out of Oklahoma, I think it's in my mind a little bit more because we have Oklahoma in our name, but I think that just based on the population of the state and the number of square miles of the state, Kansas is still a pretty big state. And the amount of people in rural areas and the sightings are still few and far. I think there's a lot of people that have sightings. They just keep it tight, close to them.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, there's a lot of people, the way I look at it is that every night in every state, there's someone going to have an encounter. They're going to see something
Yeah.
for the first time that they have no idea that it exists. And they don't know who to talk to. They don't know who to go to. They don't know. They initially they slow down and they think, okay, well, I could call a police officer. But then they think, well, wait a minute, no crime was committed. What am I going to say? They're going to think
Right.
they're going to think I'm off my nut. And so they start to slow down, and then they go, well, I'll call a game warden. Well, if I call a game warden, he or she might think I'm off my nut too. What are they going to do? They can't trap
Yeah.
this thing. It's too big,
Yeah.
And
You're in
so
a small rural towns. You really don't want to be the quack of the town.
exactly. So they start going through this scenario in their head of, well, if I say something, this is probably what they might say, or this is what they might think or do, and well, that's not going to make any sense, and I don't want to be labeled as that because I'm going to have to give my name, and so they start really going through thinking everything through logically, and then they end up saying, I'll just keep it to myself. And
Right.
so the problem with that, which I do respect, because I do believe that there's certain people you don't want to talk to regarding a recent encounter, because it can lead to other people knocking at your door that you don't want. You don't want to be on the
Yeah.
radar.
Right.
But it's one of those things where there are certain law enforcement agencies that have no clue that these creatures do exist. And there are law enforcement agencies that within specific agencies, certain people that have known about these for a long time.
Right.
And they know about them, but they keep it very close to them. And they have very special contact sources that they are told by higher authority that if they come in contact or someone comes in contact with one of these creatures, they are to either call this number and these federal people will come out and talk to them. And basically, the talk goes something like, you didn't see what you saw a bear, and that's what you're going to say.
Right.
And which stupefies people. They're just like, well, wait a minute. No, I know what I saw. No, you're not hearing me, sir. What you saw was a bear, and that's what I would suggest. And when you ask for reasoning, like, why? Why do you want to cover something up that, uh, have a good day, you take care?
Yep.
And
For
so,
me, for my, I didn't see, but hearing was enough for me. I've never heard anything about like that in my life. Just something snapping like that, and like it was uh, on 2 feet, walking, snapping as it went, and getting closer. And the noise was stationary near me. It didn't come from a distance, like a mile away. You could hear it come closer to you. It was there and decided to instantly start snapping and walking.
hmm.
Now, that's 1978. I can tell that to anybody I want now.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
My age, it's years and years ago. I don't care.
Right,
Story.
right. Well,
Um,
another incident that came to mind out of Kansas is one of the most terrifying encounters, actually, that I've ever heard. Happened to come out of Kansas.
wow.
And it was, I'm trying to recall the exact episode, and I can't off the top of my head, but it was a Kansas mother and her son. And they were driving, it's in central Kansas. It is at a water refuge um, location. It's been this for a number of years, I guess.
Huh.
And surrounding this area is all farm fields, corn, wheat. This particular instance, it happened to be corn. And
Uh-huh.
long story short, the son was learning to drive. The mother had just bought the son a truck, and they were going to this water refuge area because it was just a pretty day. And on the way, there was a car that passed them just driving like a bat out of hell. And some guys looked, as she said, just kind of terrified. And they drove by them and they were just speeding as all get out. And she's like, what in the world? So she can't account later maybe what had happened to these guys, but they just were driving, happened to be driving very erratic and very crazy as they were leaving this area, and she was driving in, her and her son. Long story short, her and her son, um, there was a couple Bigfoot. One was in the field eating. One was near the entrance or exit. There was one way in, one way out. And they had to get in the car quietly, get it started, and go right past one of these Bigfoot that was digging on the side. And as they rounded this corner, the son was driving, it threw up rocks and hit this Bigfoot, which he took as aggression. And he grabbed a rock and he started running after the truck.
Wow.
It started on all fours on the ground, and he was advancing on the truck, and the mother said, speed up, speed up, speed up. And so he began to punch it as fast as he could. And then eventually this creature went from 4 and then started running on all 2. And it was just a very horrifying event. The mother and the son got home. They didn't say anything for a day or two. And this occurred out in the middle of Kansas, America, and in a place you'd never would have thought, right in the daytime on a weekend. So,
What year?
I'd have to go back to the record. I'm going to say this was probably, this young man was 16. So I'm going to say it's probably about 2013,
Oh, okay.
somewhere in there. And I never did get a chance to talk to the young man. What was very interesting about this particular event is that this young man was followed by a truck, and he eventually encountered this gentleman at a bar that had followed him. And he went up to this gentleman and he said, "Who are you? What are you following me?" And the guy was by himself. He said, "I don't know who you're talking about." So he told the guy, he says, "You're going to sit down and have a beer. We're going to talk." The guy said, "No, we're not." He said, "Yes, we are," because this kid was a good-sized kid. And he said, "No, you don't understand. You're going to set your, you know what, down." So the guy sat down. He was by himself. He had a beer, and he left. And the young man, never got any more information out of this guy. But it was a reminder that there are people that follow these people that have these encounters like this. They basically want it quiet, these recent encounters. And this has been going on for decades. This is nothing new necessarily.
Yeah.
But getting back,
I'm gonna give you the name of the small town. We'll just have to bleep it out, but this is location, so you can have some kind of a record of a location.
Okay.
And the town is called Solomon, Kansas.
Solomon, Kansas.
You can look that up, Central Kansas.
Okay.
That way you get, and like I said, 1978 when this happened to me, and fortunately I did not see anything, which was good. It was enough for me to say, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it's approaching you, when this cracking noise is coming at you, it wasn't fast. It was like any human would walk at a regular pace, type getting closer to me walking, snapping. And I didn't want to look. I was just too scared. I didn't see what I would have seen, what it was.
So you heard this because you had the windows down?
Not sure. I may have, because it was in summer, late summer probably. I didn't want to look. I didn't even want to turn my head left to look. I was looking straight ahead the driveway, and after that was a blur. I remember flooring the gas, getting out of that driveway and gone. After that, I don't know what happened. It's so many years ago.
Well, I don't blame you.
You have an old memory of something, but after that, you don't know what happened. You go back to your life.
That's right. No, I don't blame you a bit. I mean, it's a very it's
just the scary part of the memory is there and what it did, and everything else. After that, I don't. It's too long ago.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I remember an incident my brother Bill and my brother Lane had as kids. There was 3 figures that they could see that there was all hair. It was they made it out. The shadows of these 3 figures was walking silently by their window, and the moon was out, and you could see all the hair around the out perimeter of the face, and how it went up and down the back. And in the chest, you could see that it was all hair, and there was a large, a middle, and a small one. And as it crossed the big window pane in front of my brother's bedroom, there was a north side window that they could have peeked out. And one of my brothers got up. He said, "Lance, I didn't have the courage to look out. I didn't. I wasn't going to do it." He says,
"That was me. Not going to have the courage to look that way why? My immediate thought was, let me get her in the car, because we're going to get the hell out of here."
You're right.
When you feel threatened, if it was walking away, okay, cool. It's just going away. It might be a little different, but when something is coming toward you, instinct has, there's a threat, you need to go.
Exactly.
I don't know what it was. I have no idea, but I'm going to assume it's something large, because couldn't have been a cow, couldn't have been an animal, couldn't have been somebody walking through there because, you know, you can't be snapping those things like that. You know, your wrist would be broke.
Right.
It just would, yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense at a remote location with someone there that.
No cars, nobody around. No
Yeah,
boomers,
exactly.
you know, nobody around there. That's why we were going back there. We were going to make out, you know.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of places in Kansas. I think, in my personal opinion, Kansas is a state that you don't hear a lot about, but in my opinion, that doesn't mean it's because there's not any Bigfoot there. I believe there are hundreds in each state, and Kansas is no exception because Kansas has just as many river bottoms, deep ravines, thick wooded areas, just like Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of locations that these creatures can be in, hibernate. I do believe, getting back to your question earlier, I believe there is some type of level of migration that they like to go to, that they like certain areas because either it will have certain berries come into harvest at certain times, and certain farms, these old abandoned farms, used to have a lot of nut trees and, you know, fresh berries. And so even though everything has grown up, a lot of these berries just grow wild now. And so these are just kind of isolated little harvest areas for these Bigfoot to be. And they may have a wild patch of black thornless blackberries that come into harvest. So, and if they're not bothered, they like this area. That may be an area that they frequent. This particular group. Not all the Bigfoot, but just a select number that know about this area. So I believe that goes on all the time. In Oklahoma, in these remote areas, that you have these abandoned farms, and there's plenty of those abandoned farms and silos and barns. These farmers, they just leave and abandon, and everything gets grown up. So another incident comes to mind where my brother Lane's father-in-law, who is not really into Bigfoot, he doesn't review channels, he doesn't go out and investigate, he does none of that. And he was pulled off on the side of the road just to be safe while he was talking to his brother. And this was just outside of our hometown. As the crow flies, it was probably about 10 miles from where my brother Lane had his encounter with his friend. But this, he pulled off on the side of the road. He was by himself, and he saw something swatting like crows. Crows were dive bombing something, and he could see it over the ridge of just off to the right, which was to the west. And then he lost sight of it, and then all of a sudden, this Bigfoot just leaped in front of the road about 40 feet and looked at him. He was kind of startled, you could tell, and it leaped up the other side of this embankment that was about 15 to 20 yards away, and about, you know, the old dirt embankments that are just kind of eroded that are up high. It was up about another 6 feet off the flat graded road, and it just completely hurtled over that and ran about another 150 yards into this tree line. Well, after doing a little bit of a Google search, we found that where it was coming from, it was a very hot July day. It was coming from an area of an isolated pond in the middle of this 160. And you could not see the pond from the north, from the south, from the east, or from the west. And we suspect that it was drinking. It took a drink, and it was on its way back. Now, where it was on its way back to, on Google Earth, there was some abandoned farmhouses to the east, directly east of it. And we suspect that's exactly where it was going, in these thickets where there was barns and old house places. And we just, it just makes perfect sense to us. These creatures will habitate these areas because it's already blended in. It can remain cool on a hot day, and it wasn't too far away from a water source.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, but something was just there. It heard me back in, heard me get out, close the door, and just not too long after, probably within a minute, because we were still standing.
Oh,
and
wow.
She just leaned up against the car, and right after I closed my door, and I kind of closed my door, maybe kissed, or we hadn't done anything. We were just standing there, and then it started. What?
That was pretty quick.
So, yeah. And the thing that gets me was something was there. It didn't come from anywhere. It was like something was standing there the whole time. And when I arrived, I must have woke something up, and it started to walk towards me, snapping the brush very loud. Like, who could do that?
Wow.
When it comes at you, when the noise comes at you, like somebody's walking, and each step was a snap. Like you have to walk through the brush, and you're snapping it as you're walking. But it's getting closer, and that's when I grabbed her. When I realized it was getting closer, at that moment I grabbed her, threw her in the front, driver's side, get over to the passenger side. I'm driving out here. I didn't want to walk around the car. It takes too much time.
Right.
Or her to walk around, whatever. You're getting it.
So what did she think, of these sounds?
She heard it too, but like I said, the memory of it all was quick, and I got out of there. Not sure what her reaction was. She's probably just as scared as I was, but she felt free for me to handle it my way. Throw it in the car.
Did your friend that owns that property, did you share with him what you experienced?
I'm not sure. I can't remember if I even talked to him about it or not. Probably not. No, I don't think I did. Just kind of kept it to myself. As a kid, I was a different kid. It's like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
You get scared that night, I'm done. And you just let it go. But it kind of stuck with me because I've been telling the story over a number of years to friends. Yeah, I had my little experience when I was a kid, and that's it. So it's kept alive just by that talking about.
Okay. I was just curious if you told him if there was any other family experiences that he had, or that another family member had.
I'm not sure. I haven't been in touch with him since high school.
Right, right.
Yeah, and it was his grandfather's house. I knew that. That's why we were able to go out there.
I always wonder about these houses, that family have. What kind of experiences, if any at all, that they had living there? And, why was the place abandoned now? Was there any causation of why it was abandoned, or just a family member? No one wanted to live out there. I always am fascinated.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated with kind of what people, because I believe that the people that have had some fascinating experiences, horrifying experiences, I will say that, I believe that are the old timers. I believe that they don't know how to operate the internet very well, and that's why we started doing a toll-free number in the very beginning, is I just felt that they may not know how to do texting or email, but they know
Right.
how to dial a number. And our initial instincts were correct. And I still feel that there's thousands and thousands of people that have had experiences that grew up very rural, and their grandfather, their grandparents, and themselves can recall some pretty horrific encounters of just where they grew up and what was said. They may have called it something else at the time, like a chicken man or whatever usually the name will project whatever it's stealing, or pig man or whatever. But I've encountered lots of people that will say, yeah, an incident that was really just strange. My uncle never found out, but he had a sow and some piglets. And matter of fact, 2 sows. They weighed about 200 pounds apiece. And he never found out how they got out of the fence. They didn't dig out, and the fence was kind of crushed down, and the gate was locked still. We just never found out what happened, And so there's a bunch of questions with people that never went to that next level to say, well, I wonder if it was a Bigfoot type creature. It probably has crossed their mind, but it just didn't go any further since they didn't physically see anything. It was just their livestock missing was strange.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a lot of those people that were saying, didn't see anything, but here's a strange event that happened with my family, and then they'll go into how livestock came missing, and that it was no man could do this because it was how it was positioned, or how it was located, or how it was perched.
Yeah.
So, well, man, very, very, very interesting. Thank you so much for
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, that's something I figured you'd want to put your pin on the map.
Yes.
As something, and compare it to others that you might get now or in the future. And yeah, I can relate it to something back in the late 70s or whatever. That was my little tidbit.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.